Welcome everyone to the Hartford Audubon Society's presentation of Exploring the Watkinson Library's World of Ornithology, Birds, Books, and Art. This event was held at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut on October 21st, 2025. At this wonderful event, members and their guests got the chance to view centuries-old literature and art from the Ostrom and Alice Talcott Ender's Ornithology Collection, a world-class collection that includes about 8,000 historic and contemporary works on birds. Thanks to the collaborative efforts of Sir Gerard Ramsawak and Dr. Christina Bleyer, a special evening of viewing and discussion was arranged exclusively for members and friends of the Hartford Audubon Society. The Watkinson Library is open to the public. If you would like to visit and see this collection for yourself, please visit Trinity College's website for more information. Thank you, and please enjoy this presentation.
I would like to welcome everyone, our very distinguished guests, and I see on my right here, former President Joanne Burger-Sweeney. Everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My fellow Hartford Audubon Society members, I see a lot of faces I recognize. I'm new to the club, but I still recognize many faces here. To the faculty members, we have a few faculty members here today. Friends and family, welcome. We also, I want to extend a special welcome to those who are joining us virtually. Tonight, we're expecting viewers from as far as Japan, the Netherlands, Germany, Hungary, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, United Kingdom, Canada, and my homeland of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome all, and thank you for finding the time to join us tonight, especially with the time differences, because Japan is in the morning today, tomorrow. I am Sir Gerard Ramsawak. I'm a fellow birder from the beautiful Twin Isle of Trinidad and Tobago. And you may ask yourself, what is the connection between this Trinidadian, Trinity College, and Hartford Audubon Society? Have you all wondered that? I could summarize my answer with 5 words: Miller, Dominique, Oz, Christiana, and Annette, who is not here tonight. Yeah. Miller, who sits in the front here, introduced me to Trinity College 31 years ago when she pioneered Trinity study abroad in Trinidad and Tobago. Dominique is my daughter, and she reinforced this relationship by being a student at Trinity College from 2014 to 2018. That's the same year President Burger-Sweeney took her role as the first female and woman of color president of Trinity College. Isn't that incredible? And she did a fantastic job, everybody. Ors is the husband of Joanne, with whom the idea of doing an event such as this was birthed and nurtured. Thank you, Ors. Christina, the heart and soul of this event. Without her, this event would not have been possible. And Annette, the former president of Hartford Audubon Society, with whom I attended a Trinity bicentennial event here at the Watkinson. She thought it would be a great idea to do a similar event for Hartford Audubon Society. So this is why we are here today. The main reason for this event is to learn more about this extraordinary institution, the Watkinson Library, a unique gem found within the walls of Trinity College. We have been graciously entertained by our hostess, Dr. Christina Bleyer, and our host, Eric Johnson DeBaufre, who gave us a tour and an unrestricted opportunity to view the prize books in their collection, namely Birds of America by John J. Audubon. Did everybody get an opportunity to look at that book? Isn't it amazing? Every time I see it, I think about Harry Potter for some reason. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Anyhow, for me, it's a little bit different, this event. It's an engagement celebration. I hope this will be an engagement, a promise marking marking the beginning of a beautiful relationship that will continue to educate, inspire, explore generations to come, and most explore generations to come. One of the most precious gifts given to us, which is our natural history, the fauna and flora that surrounds us. To Hartford Audubon Society and Trinity College, as the official matchmaker of this event, you have my blessing. So I hope a lot of great things will come out of this one event. And on that note, I would like to introduce the Director of Special Collections and Archives at the Watkinson Library, the heart and soul of this event. So let's put our hands together to welcome Dr. Christina Bleyer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much again for being here this evening. It is so great to see the 1823 room filled with people and birds, and it's just great, and desserts. Thank you so much for joining me today as well to explore what I think is one of Trinity College's greatest treasures. I'm a little bit biased, but the Watkinson Library, and within the Watkinson Library, the Ostrom Enders Ornithology Collection. What I want to share with you this evening isn't just the story of a library or a single collection. It's a story about how curiosity, beauty, science, and yes, birds, can bring generations of people together. So I'm going to start by giving you just a little brief history of the Watkinson Library. The Watkinson was established in 1858, the result of a bequest by David Watkinson. He was a Hartford businessman and philanthropist with a remarkable belief in the power of learning. Watkinson's vision was ahead of his time. He sought to create, through his bequest, a free public reference library open to all who wish to learn. For many decades, the Watkinson operated as an independent library in downtown Hartford, serving the community broadly. In 1952, to secure its future and expand its reach, the trustees of the Watkinson entered a partnership with Trinity College. The Watkinson was deposited at the college, creating a unique institution. It is both the college's Special Collections and Archives library and an endowed public library. So anyone can come and use the Watkinson. It is not restricted to affiliates of Trinity College. This is a public serving institution. So all of you, anybody that you know that has an interest in the ornithology collection or any of our collections is welcome to come and visit and use the collections. Oh, come on in. Yeah, there's some seats in that like third row there where Casey's waving. So today, the Watkinson continues to honor that dual mission. We preserve rare and unique materials while making them accessible to students, researchers, and the wider public. Its holdings span centuries and continents, encompassing rare books, archives, manuscripts, art, artist books, and cultural heritage materials that tell global and local stories alike. One of the most extraordinary collections housed here is the Ostrom Enders Ornithology Collection. This collection reflects the passion, vision, and generosity of Ostrom Enders. He was a Hartford business leader, a civic activist, a sportsman, and after retirement, a dedicated breeder of rare North American waterfowl. Ostrom Enders came from a distinguished Hartford family. His grandfather, Thomas O. Enders, was a banker and one of the founders and the second president of the Aetna Life Insurance Company. His father, John Ostrom Enders, spent 70 years as a Hartford banker and engineered the 1927 mergers that created Hartford National Bank and Trust Company. His older brother, John Franklin Enders, became a Harvard Medical School professor and shared the 1954 Nobel Prize in Physiology for work that led to vaccines against polio and measles. Ostrom himself followed in the family footsteps, beginning as a clerk and teller at Hartford National in 1925. After serving in the Navy during World War II, he returned to the bank, rising to become president in 1947 and chairman in 1960. Under his careful leadership, the bank grew through mergers, and he became a pioneer in branch banking and the use of computers in banking, which was remarkably forward-thinking for his time. After his retirement in 1967, Enders turned his energy to his lifelong passion for birds. He began breeding rare North American waterfowl and gave many species to the Smithsonian National Zoological Park in Washington, D.C. His love of birds also inspired his extraordinary collection of ornithological books and art. He eventually donated those to the Watkinson Library, and most of what you saw this evening was donated by Ostrom Enders. Through this gift, his private passion became a public legacy. So what is in the Enders Ornithology collection? I think it's pretty remarkable both in its scope and its depth. It includes rare books, including landmark works in ornithology, scientific treatises, beautifully illustrated folios, and early printed works documenting bird species from around the world. It also includes archival materials, so things like personal papers, field notes, and correspondence, where this is where I think some of you all might be most interested, is in these field notes, so that you can trace the evolution of ornithological science over time and see, what birds were around in what areas during Ostrom Enders' time and now through the present. I can't say that we have an exhaustive record, but we do have some really interesting things. We have art and prints featuring stunning hand-colored engravings. You saw some of those earlier, lithographs and watercolors that blend scientific observation with artistic beauty. And then we have modern research materials, so things like field guides and other contemporary ornithological studies. Among some of the highlights, again, that you saw this evening are works by John James Audubon, whose Birds of America changed how people saw and studied avian life, as well as countless other contributions by European and American naturalists. This is a collection where art meets science. It's a record of human curiosity, discipline, and delight in the natural world. The Watkinson Library is not a static archive. So I want to talk a little bit about why this matters, besides the beauty, besides everything that you've probably already experienced. But it's these materials and these sorts of gifts to the Watkinson that make it's not a static archive, it's a vibrant center for research, teaching, and creativity. Students handle these materials in class sessions, artists draw inspiration from their beauty, and scientists and historians alike explore their significance. The Enders collection, like so many of our holdings, acts as a bridge between past and future. It shows how one person's passion can spark a legacy that outlives them, inspiring learning for generations. Today, we continue to honor the missions of both David Watkinson and Ostrom Enders, preserving these extraordinary materials and sharing them widely. We're digitizing parts of the collection, integrating them into teaching and research, and inviting the broader community to engage with them through exhibits, events, and scholarship. The Enders collection stands as a testament to the power of personal vision and generosity. It reminds us that libraries are more than buildings. They are living ecosystems of knowledge and inspiration. So as you explore the Watkinson Library today, I invite you to see it not just as a place where books are kept, or maybe more importantly, where bird books are kept, but as a living repository of human curiosity. When you encounter the birds in these works, remember that they are part of a larger story, a story of one family's legacy, of Hartford's history, and of our shared human fascination with the natural world. Like David Watkinson and Ostrom Enders, we each have a role in carrying knowledge forward. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Eric Johnson DeBaufre. He is our rare books and special collections librarian here. Maybe some of you met him as you were looking at materials. And he's going to talk a little more in depth about some of the materials that we have.
All right, good evening, and thank you so much, Christina and Gerard, and to all of you for inviting me to talk with all of you about some of the valuable ornithological material in our collections, which everything that I'm going to talk about tonight was on display downstairs on our tables, with the exception of the Japanese books that were on one of the tables. So hopefully you got a chance to look at some of those. Although the largest and by far the most substantial part of Watkinson's ornithological material came to us in 1982 through, as Christina mentioned, this generous donation to Trinity and Watkinson Library by Ostrom Enders. Enders was a trustee of both the Watkinson Library and of the college. Our ornithology collection also includes, though, valuable material that was left to Trinity College, in fact, quite early on, by Dr. Gurdon Russell, and I just want to acknowledge him, Trinity College class of 1834. So he is the person who gave to Trinity College Robert Havel's personal copy of Birds of America, an incredible treasure in our collection. But we also have a number of works in natural history that were purchased for Watkinson Library prior to its move to Trinity in 1950. So let me just start by saying that at the outset that any presentation that attempts to highlight the most valuable ornithological materials held by Watkinson Library is inevitably going to be both partial and highly variable, given the audience that you're addressing. So if I, for instance, were addressing a group of bird artists, I would have selected a very different set of materials to talk about, and this would be a very different kind of talk. And in each case, there would be no doubt omissions and perhaps inclusions of material that some in the audience might object to. So with that in mind, though, I ask your indulgence and forgiveness in advance for my rather selective presentation. And I hope that many of you will, at some future point, search our catalog, visit our reading room, consult our materials, and inform me of just how imperfect and incomplete my list and selection is. However, I do feel fairly confident in my choices, since all of the books that I'm going to talk about have been featured in really an incredible landmark in the history of the field. It's Erwin Stresemann's book, Ornithology from Aristotle to the Present. Stresemann, a great German historian of ornithology, first wrote this work in 1951. It appeared in German. It was translated in 1970s into English. And I highly recommend it if you don't already know it. Since I knew that I'd be addressing a group of serious birders, I decided to focus my presentation on some of the outstanding materials that have contributed to the development of ornithology as a science, as well as on works of historical and aesthetic importance. So I'm going to start with a group of materials that I'm going to call pre-modern works. And by pre-modern works, I'm taking as the development of modern ornithology, a period in the late 17th century, and I'll discuss the figure in a moment. But of the many interesting pre-modern works in our collection, I want to talk briefly about the following ones. And again, these were all on the tables downstairs. Conrad Gesner's Historia Animalium, 1555, with German editions of that work in 1557, 82, and 1600. Pierre Bellon's L'Histoire de la Nature des Oiseaux from 1555. Ulysses Aldrovandi's Ornithologia from 1599. And two other works, Francisco Hernandez's Nova Plantarum Animalium et Mineralium Mexicanorum, and John Johnston's Historiae Naturalis de Avibus. Although of varying quality, each of these works contributed something important to the development of ornithology as a discipline. So Gesner first. Although much might be said about it, Conrad Gesner's Historia Animalium stands out among its contemporaries, not merely for its comprehensiveness. It is a multi-volume work that aspired to be an encyclopedia of universal knowledge on the distribution, the physical characteristics, the behavior, the culinary and medicinal uses of birds, and it supplements all of that with a wealth of antiquarian information on various birds. That's one reason that it's important. But more importantly, was the method that Conrad Gesner used. So again, this is a work from the 16th century. To produce this work, Gesner relied not simply on his own observations and research, nor did he rely simply on previous authorities, Aristotle and others. He drew as well on contributions from contemporary scholars across Germany, Italy, France, and England, all of with whom he corresponded. So Gesner's Historia can be seen as a kind of forerunner of a transnational intellectual community of the 17th and 18th centuries that's been designated as the Republic of Letters. This is something that, as I said, kind of people generally associate with a slightly later time, and gave birth to really important sort of scientific discoveries in astronomy. But here, Gesner is doing all of this to produce this incredible work on the history of animals, a portion of which is devoted to birds. It's also very notable for being a work that was rapidly translated into the vernacular, in this case in German. And so, why is that important? Well, by translating it into non-Latin language, he greatly expanded people's participation in natural science, right? People who were not elite, learned folk, who had not gone to university, were not Latin literate, were more easily able to participate in the development of science and ornithology through having a work that was written in their native tongue. 2 years prior to Gesner's 1557 German Vogelbuch, that's the German edition title, a Frenchman named Pierre Bellon published L'Histoire de la Nature des Oiseaux, a book notable for at least 3 things. The first is that it includes in it a comparison of human and avian anatomy based on dissections conducted by Dylanne himself. And those are included as illustrations in Dylanne's Histoire. It also developed a system of classification that combined morphological and ecological principles. So looking at the forms of birds as well as their ecology to develop a rudimentary system of classification, quite novel. And then finally, again, like Gesner, was its author's decision to publish the book in his native language, in this case French, rather than in Latin. So there is no Latin edition of Dylanne. It exists only in French. That last decision was probably necessitated by the fact that Dylanne was largely self-educated. He did not go to university. He had limited facility with Latin. But none of that should diminish the interest and importance of his work. Like Gesner, he is enlarging people's participation in a kind of citizen science early in the 16th century. And I should say his inclusion of an illustration comparing human and bird skeletons really helped to cement the importance of anatomical study for ornithology, and it earned him the label the father of comparative anatomy from later authors. Dylanne's classificatory approach was followed by the next person I'm going to talk about, Ulisse Aldrovandi, an Italian who was university educated. His great work is the Ornithology. Our edition here is from 1610. But the editions were published earlier in the 16th century. Aldrovandi followed this classificatory approach, and he grouped birds into those with hard and powerful beaks, those that bathe in dust or in dust and water, songbirds, waterfowl, and shorebirds. These were his big categories. So while later authors looked on these categories with a kind of amusement, the approach that Aldrovandi took was definitely an improvement on the organization of birds that occurred in Aldrovandi's rival, Gesner, who simply listed birds alphabetically. All right. And then finally, two mid-17th century publications deserve note. The first one is Francisco Hernandez's Nova Plantarum Animalium et Mineralium Mexicanorum Historia, or the new history of the plants, animals, and minerals of Mexico. This wasn't published until 1651, but it was produced in the 1570s in manuscript form when Hernandez, who was a physician to King Philip II, traveled to Mexico and Brazil and spent 7 years there conducting research. His interests were largely botanical, but he also had interest in animals of all kinds. And his work is valuable for the following reason. It greatly enlarged at the time the number of known bird species by including a whole host of birds from Mexico and Brazil that had not been cataloged by people. As I said, it didn't appear in publication until after Hernandez's death, but he was able to identify and describe approximately 230 new bird species, which he designated according to their Nahuatl names. So that made that contribution a little bit difficult for people to follow because he gave the names of all the animals in indigenous languages. Nahuatl is language of Mexico and parts of South America. And some of the illustrations also didn't make it easy for people to follow. By contrast, the next work that I'm going to talk about is John Johnston's Historiae. Johnston did not undertake original research himself. He just compiled work by others with 133 Brazilian species, again, added to his list, that all were supplied to him by the research of a German named George Markgraf. But despite the generally bad reputation that this work of Johnston's has among historians of ornithology, it enjoyed a great deal of popularity, and part of that is probably due to these illustrations, which were considered quite fine in its time. I want to move now to what I consider the group of books that really are sort of modern, the beginnings of modern ornithology. These are books that come from the late 17th through the 18th century, a period that historians such as Stresemann and more recently Michael Walters agree was a kind of crucible in which a truly modern, systematic, and scientific approach to ornithology was formed. And the principal works I'm going to talk about here are three. They are Francis Willoughby's Ornithologiae Libri Tres, or 3 books of ornithology. Another French work, Mathurin-Jacques Brisson's Ornithologie from 1760, and Georges-Louis Leclerc, the Comte de Buffon's Histoire naturelle des oiseaux. All of these are really important for different reasons. Stresemann and Walters both agree that Francis Willoughby's posthumously published Ornithologiae is a landmark of ornithological writing that replaced a by then 2,000-year-old set of principles for avian classification, and replaced it with one based not on function, but on form. In other words, a purely morphological approach to classification. Writing about Willoughby's book, Stresemann describes him as revolutionary, noting his attention to now familiar reference points such as beak form, foot structure, body size, and the like as ways that you go about classifying different types of birds. Just how remarkable Willoughby's book proved to be can be illustrated by this table that I'm about to show you. This appears at the head of a section describing terrestrial birds. So you can see it has this sort of branching set of diagrams here, and I'll talk a little bit about it in in a little more detail in a moment. If you're not familiar with this style of presentation, the table shown here is a stepping stone on the path to the development of Lamarckian dichotomous keys. Those are named for Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, a great figure in 18th century science, who popularized their use in his 1778 botanical work, Flore Françoise. So what are dichotomous keys? They're a tool that zoologists and others in science use for the identification of unidentified biological species. And they consist of a series of yes or no questions, hence dichotomous, about specific characteristics of an entity. The answer to any question leads either to an end point, and thus to an answer, or to another question pair. If you're interested in trying your hand at this, you can find a kind of simplified version, and I really do encourage people to try this out at the website for the BYU Life Science Museum. So if you click on that link, you can try to identify a whole variety of birds using dichotomous keys. So in this case, this is B114 in their list of, I think, 50 different birds that you can try this with. And the first question it asks you is the beak of the bird longer than its head? So you've got a yes or no here, right? So you'd answer here no, right? It's not longer than its head. So that would then take you on to another question that would ask you about a particular characteristic of the bird, and you'd answer that yes or no, and you'd keep going and you'd keep going. And then you discover that this is anybody? A kingfisher, yeah, the beauty. Yeah, gorgeous. So this is really fun. I highly recommend this. Willoughby's tables, while not true dichotomous keys, help pave the way for their development by presenting this series of branching paths structured more or less around a series of binaries. Land birds, I'm just going to go back to this in a second. Land birds, which all of these, this concerns all land birds, possess either curved beaks and talons or straighter beaks and talons. And the former can be divided again into those that are either carnivorous birds of prey, like hawks, or frugivorous birds, like parrots. In developing these tables, Willoughby was almost certainly influenced by the botanical tables of his friend John Reyes, another Englishman, which were produced for John Wilkins' earlier botanical work, an essay towards a real character and a philosophical language. Tragically, Willoughby, who, like I said, pretty much all historians of ornithology agree, really presented this landmark work in 1678. He died at the age of 37, and so was unable to contribute further to the field. But if we leap ahead to 1760, we come to another figure whose work deserves praise for its contributions to the development of ornithology, and that is Mathurin Jacques Brisson. Brisson, a Frenchman, was a systematizer along the lines of the Swiss biologist Carl Linnaeus, a name you're probably familiar with, who gave us the system of binomial nomenclature, right? This is the two-name naming system of genus and species that we're all familiar with. By the time Brisson's 6-volume Ornithologie appeared in 1760, though, Linnaeus's Systema Naturae, which was already a kind of taxonomic authority for many learned Europeans, it was in its 10th edition and had set the number of bird orders at 6. So before I proceed here, I want to make this a little bit participatory. Can anyone tell me, or us, how many orders of birds are currently recognized by the IOC, or I guess it's now the IOU, the International Ornithological Union? Any guesses as to how many orders of birds? No? I'll tell you. There are currently 44 accepted orders of birds by the IOC, though that's going to fluctuate. I mean, there are people who are saying, no, there are 46. Others who are saying, no, it's just 40. So, this varies, but 44. Okay, so how about prior to the IOC's very recent determination that there are 44 bird orders, how about Sibley and Alquist? This bird order list occurred in, I think the 1980s or 90s, after DNA analysis, was available. They determined back then that there were 23 orders of birds. Okay, so it's grown as in a fairly short period of time, maybe only 30 years or so. But that's quite different from 6 of Linnaeus. Any guesses how many Brisson came up with? Relying only on morphology. He had no DNA analysis available to him in 1760, of course. Brisson set the number of orders at 26. This guy was a genius. significantly more than those accepted by Linnaeus, and 3 more than those created using tools and methods that would not be developed for another 200 years. In addition to greatly expanding the number of orders, Bresson's Ornithology increased Linnaeus's genera from 51 to 115 and added 320 new species to all those already known. His classifications were so exacting and careful that Stresemann, a German, who's going to praise a Frenchman, are you kidding me? Writing in 1951, said that Bresson's heavily subdivided system approaches our own more closely than any attempt at classification made in the following 80 years. It's really remarkable. So why don't we know more about this guy? Significantly, but also shamefully, some of Bresson's contributions of new genera and species found their way into Linnaeus's 12th edition, published in 1766. Linnaeus added 15 of Bresson's genera and 240 of Bresson's 320 species, none of which he credited to Bresson. He just took them, added them, said nothing about Bresson. Unfortunately, this was not the only indignity Bresson was to suffer. Following the death of his patron, a great collector named Reyes, whose private collection of bird specimens was pretty much unparalleled, Bresson was stripped of his curatorial job, curating this collection, because Reyes' arch rival, the Comte de Buffon, arranged for the collection to be transferred to the Cabinet du Roi of Louis XV, who was Buffon's patron. And so Buffon took all this material and had near exclusive use of it, and Bresson lost his career and contributed nothing thereafter to ornithology. With Reyes' collection at his disposal, Buffon produced a major scientific work of the 18th century, a massive 36-volume Histoire naturelle, 9 volumes of which are devoted to birds. It's no exaggeration to say that Buffon's work was given serious attention by almost every Enlightenment thinker in Europe and the Americas. And that was made easier by the fact that it was translated very, very rapidly into English, 6 volumes of it by 1776, German from 1750 to 1775, Italian 1770 to 1773, Swedish in 1802, and Russian in 1789. So everybody was reading this book who was serious about science. These 9 volumes that concern birds contrast, though, with the work of Linnaeus and Bresson quite greatly. Buffon is an absolute anti-systematizer. He's like the anti-Linnaeus. He's pretty close to believing that the various classes of existing things in the animal world, that it's just individuals, purely. Really, there are no real different species. It's just everyone's an individual. And so at first glance, this might make it seem like his contribution to ornithology was rather limited, but what he contributed really was his own example and his reiteration of the need to pay close and careful attention to the subtle differences among various birds. And that stimulated a kind of empirical research program, a very, very close attention to these differences. By noting, he also noted that different regions with very similar environments nevertheless tended to contain very different kinds of plant and animal life. And he speculated, too, that changes in environmental circumstances could lead to changes in animals themselves. And so that has led some people to consider Buffon a kind of proto-evolutionist, right? I mean, he believed that there were ways in which animals changed as a result of environmental change. And, I mean, we know that to be true from evolutionary research. I'd like to end tonight by talking about the important contributions that bird illustration has made to the history of ornithology, and to draw attention to a few interesting works in our collection there. Too often, illustration and illustrators have been given only minimal attention in the official histories, and I think that's wrong. It's based, I think, in a belief that their work is really merely aesthetic rather than scientific. And I think that that's unfair to these illustrators. The first work I want to mention, you all saw. It's an absolutely exceptionally rare work. So rare, in fact, that it seems to exist in only 2 known copies, one of which is in our collection downstairs. The other is owned by the Smithsonian. It's a set of hand-colored engravings of birds made between 1773 and 1792 by Francois-Nicolas Martinet, the man, the engraver, who supplied the illustrations in both Brisson's Ornithologie and Buffon's Histoire naturelle. The fact that Martinet was trusted to supply the illustrations for arguably the 2 most significant ornithological publications in 18th century France ought to be inducement to consider his work very seriously. But when we compare it when we set it alongside his contemporaries, we can see that the birds that he presents exhibit an accuracy in their proportions and a sense of liveliness that's really absent in the work of those contemporaries. His appearance, the appearance of his work in Buffon's Histoire in particular, I would say the fact that so many people got to see those illustrations through Buffon's Histoire meant, I think, that it kind of set a standard for the future of bird illustration, that those illustrators had to at least meet or try to surpass in some way. Here's another one of a vulture. Early illustrations of birds can also provide some of our only evidence for species that went extinct prior to the development of photography. 2 books in our collection, both from the late 18th century, depict a bird called the white swamp hen, a bird that once flourished on a single island off the east coast of Australia, but that quickly went extinct following European contact in 1788. Both these books, the one is from 1789, the other from 1790, depict the bird within a year or 2 of first contact. And the one on the left here is the voyage of Governor Phillip to Botany Bay, and the other is John White's Journal of a Voyage to New South Wales. Apart from these illustrations, and here is the white swamp hen from John White's book, apart from these illustrations, only 2 preserved specimens remain of the white swamp hen's existence. So these books were really valuable to people at the time for knowledge and an image of a bird that disappeared within pretty much 40 years of contact with that island. As many of you are aware, John James Audubon's Birds of America also records a number of now extinct species, such as the passenger pigeon, the Carolina parakeet, the heath hen, the Labrador duck, and the great auk. Those are just 5 we're absolutely sure of. There are some pretty sure of. Since Gerard's already discussed Audubon downstairs a little bit. I'm going to turn, though, to his contemporary, a man named John Gould, an Englishman, and the publisher of a series of similarly monumental illustrated bird books. Unlike Audubon, Gould was not an artist, nor much of a naturalist. Michael Walters is quite sharp in his assessment of Gould and says rather bluntly that, quote, he contributed little to the development of ornithology other than a number of Lux books, which seems really harsh. Despite the fact that his contemporaries and many people today credit these gorgeously illustrated books to Gould, Gould's role in their production was largely confined to the business of identifying and in some cases creating popular demand for them and finding ingenious ways to market them. The illustrations themselves are the work of a variety of individuals, principally his wife, Elizabeth, and Edward Lear, but also Henry Richter, Joseph Wolfe, and William Hart, most of whom, and Lear very notoriously, went uncredited. In 1838, however, an opportunity to travel to Australia offered Gould his best chance to make a lasting contribution to ornithology, since no publications yet existed about the many birds that Gould encountered during his 18 months in that country. Always one to exploit a new opportunity to feed public interest, Gould, on his return, immediately set about publishing The Birds of Australia, an achievement that has earned him the title Pioneer in Australian Ornithology. Gould's other great work, which you're seeing an image from here, is his monograph on hummingbirds, proved to have slightly more mixed results. On the one hand, it's certainly true that Gould greatly enlarged awareness of the varieties of hummingbirds by amassing a huge collection of specimens in preparation for the work. By the time of his death, he owned more than 5,000 hummingbird specimens. It's also true that many of those now known were described and named by him. However, Gould made a decision in trying to market his book to exhibit a large number of stuffed specimens at the 1851 London exhibition in an effort to promote his book. And this very likely helped to produce, and it certainly at the very least contributed to, a craze for hummingbirds that led to millions of these beautiful birds being slaughtered for fashion. In 1 week, I read in 1888, 400,000 specimens were put up for auction. As I noted at the start of my presentation, I've deliberately limited myself to talking about just a small sample of some of the many wonderful ornithological materials in our collection. And I hope that this has merely whetted your appetite, that you'll visit our reading room and come and explore our collections at your leisure. Thank you very much. And I want now to introduce Don and Dora, our wonderful artists of Birds and Desserts.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you to Watkinson Library and Christina and Eric for having us, and the Society as well. We're going to jump ahead a few decades, centuries maybe, probably centuries, to present day, and kind of tell our story of Birds and Desserts. We're both artists, and you're seeing some of our pieces up here, but we're going to kind of walk through the journey, how did we come up with Birds and Desserts, and where did it come from, and where's it going? And the line below here, A New Life for Classically Illustrated Birds, kind of came a little bit from Eric. I think he called it a quasi afterlife for, right, that's it, yeah. So a lot of it was based on Audubon and some of the things you've seen tonight, but we're definitely taking it to a new place.
I'm Dora Dylanne Reyes, and I was a baker pre-pandemic. And I decided that I needed a new hobby. So I always wanted to paint. And in researching what medium I would like to do, watercolor called out to me. This was February of 2020. I started painting right before, 1 month before quarantine. I always drew a little when I was a kid, on and off, but I never painted. And it was the best thing that ever happened. And did you?
And then, so I'm Don Carter. I go by the pseudonym of Edgar Allan Slothman. That's a whole other story. And I'm a graphic designer, digital artist. So my stuff is pretty much done on the computer. And I'll kind of walk you through how I began, and then Dora will kind of show how she began, and then how they came together in Birds and Desserts. So my beginning goes way back. This is from the 1700s. No, this is from the second grade maybe. And I was drawing birds. I was labeling them. My grandfather had given me my first little golden books. Zim, I think, was the illustrator. And so I would make my own books. And so right from a young age, birds and art and books were my thing. Even through high school, I was doing birds for every possible assignment. This was a woodcut, with pretty large woodcut for an American Bittern. And so we had an Audubon book, a little smaller than the one here, I think from the 40s. And like here, we would turn the page, every week and display it in the living room. And after a while, it kind of got to me like these compositions are just so well crafted, and there's just sort of like an energy. And he was like a graphic designer to me.
Gave you that book.
Oh, and that was coincidentally was given to my aunt Dora. She's not my aunt. And so I said, let me take what I'm learning at work, which was digital, making charts and graphs and things in a computer program called Adobe Illustrator. And how can I take Audubon's work and make it my own graphically? So this was my first, not my piece, this was Audubon's piece, the Roscoe's Yellow Thrush, I think. I can't read it. And so I broke it down, made it very geometric, very simple, a little transparency. And, I liked it. I liked it a lot. And it was kind of fun. It kind of, like this simplification process kind of made me like take in everything he was doing and just sort of like almost be there with him. And so I took it further and I just kept going. And I'm just click through a bunch of stuff here of my pieces. I always stayed true to the original composition, but I would then try and make changes within it in the simplification. This one gets a little bit, more abstract almost in the feathers and the reeds. I'd introduce simple patterns. Again, very geometric, very simplified. More patterns. More like fabric-y patterns.
This is how net.
That's right. I brought this in. But then I got to a point, I'm not sure how many I was in at this point. It could have been 40 or 50. And I'm like, what am I doing? I had done this piece and this was the Audubon piece. And it's like, well, okay, I took some liberties with the others, but I'm getting to the point where I'm just like simplifying and I'm like tracing almost. And how do I make it further, push it further? So one way was with color, like totally just bring in this pop modern art color palette. I don't know if you're familiar with this piece, but it was his rattlesnake with the mockingbirds, and he got a lot of crap for this because technically rattlesnakes can't climb trees. So I made it this kind of superhero comic book kind of thing. I would crop in on things rather than include the entire composition. I would kind of zoom in on something that was just kind of graphically interesting in itself and change colors again. Mid-century modern influence came into a lot of pieces. I did quite a few of those. I would sometimes incorporate words. This is Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi lyrics, and if you can see behind the words on the right there, there's actually a cell tower, and cell towers are not good for birds. They crash into them migrating. And then there's the Dora dessert part.
So my journey began painting what I was baking during the pandemic when everyone was at home making sourdough. I was fortunate enough to have a big industrial size bag of flour because you couldn't find flour in the supermarket anymore. So I started to paint what I was baking. Objects that were food related was my favorite thing. I tried to do scenery, and it wasn't my thing. It looked like I dropped my brush in a puddle of mud, but I drew great joy from just painting food-related objects and the occasional bird. But I just continued to paint what I was baking, and I got to see my progress that way. That's where I excelled, was that. And I wanted to parlay that into a greeting card line, which I did, but I needed my brilliant graphic artist friend to show me how to use the Adobe Suite, which he did. And now I have a line called Love Fish Greeting Cards. And my desserts are on greeting cards now, and I still wanted to learn how to use more of the Adobe Suite, learn to use the Illustrator, which is what Don uses to make his birds, because I thought maybe, I could learn to make desserts that way.
And these are a few other pieces. And birds.
And more birds.
So here we get to, how did you
Yep.
describe it, the
So-
Reese's story?
Oh, this reminds me of the old Reese's peanut butter cup commercial where you had two people on bicycles riding towards each other. One had a candy bar, one had an open jar of peanut butter. They crash into each other, and boom. So birds met desserts.
So I was working on this Florida cormorant. It's based on Audubon, but very cropped in on the face, and again, very modern, very graphic with the red background. And I was kind of using this as an example to show Dora how to use Adobe Illustrator, the steps I would go through. And I was just about to, something was missing. So I said, I'm going to put like this little minnow kind of fishy thing kind of jumping into his mouth. That's going to be his meal.
And I said, absolutely not. And I said, do you know what would be really cool? A Black Forest cheesecake. You have to show me how I can create a Black Forest cheesecake in Illustrator. This will be my first digital dessert.
I was like, what? I came from this world, the very purist, the Audubon, the birds. I'm like, birds don't eat cake. They don't eat desserts. They don't, but we tried it. And when we did it, and this was Dora's cake, I was like, there is something here. There's something magical. There's something special. It's unique. I've never seen it. And I loved it. It was just incredible. So we kept going. This is probably our second collaboration where I loved, this is the tufted auk from Audubon, and I love that kind of straight on bird. I wanted to just blow that up and make it super graphic. And I did, just the head, but I added a little touch to his eye, and I don't know if anyone will recognize that. It's a little bit inspired by the Stanley Kubrick film Clockwork Orange. There was sort of this menace and this sort of intensity, and I loved that. And I thought it was done with the piece, but then going back to what we had just done, I was like, well, maybe I can add a food to this bird that's going to make him kind of edgy and conceptual. I said, well, what do auks eat? They eat seafood, I'm assuming. So I did this little shrimp cocktail.
And I said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So in the movie, these hooligans would go to a place called the Caroba Milk Bar, where the milk was spiked, and they could drink it and then go out and live their life of crime. So I thought, milk, milk. What goes with milk?
Someone said it. So our second birds and desserts. So, you know, a lot of people ask, well, how do you work? Because now we have like 75 done, but sometimes we start with the birds, sometimes we start with the dessert, sometimes in this case, it was an existing piece. So I had done this previously, thought it was kind of cool and graphic. But again, there's a fish in its mouth. That was a problem.
So I thought this bird needed a blueberry pie.
And what Dora's also great at is like color and just sort of like bringing these things to a new life. And this is a great example of that. And we'll show you some others. So the pieces we've shown you before, her desserts were done on the computer. We started looking at, well, wait a minute, you have this huge library of watercolor desserts. How can we start incorporating that in with my digital birds? So this is definitely right off of an Audubon piece where the bird is, the sparrow is on some rocks. And in this case, it's on Rugelach.
This was also a watercolor piece. I was having a little popsicle snack and I decided to paint it, and then thought it would be a wonderful addition to his snowbirds.
Yeah, a lot of our pieces have a very fantasy feel to them. So in this case, Dora added this kind of carousel of cupcakes.
Also watercolor. Also watercolor.
And so we go back and forth. Sometimes the desserts are digital, sometimes they are watercolor, but in every case, I do the birds and Dora does the desserts, and the ideas come from everywhere. So you remember this guy. So we introduced a dessert for him. And we just kept going. I mean, it was incredible, taking Audubon's compositions and just, how do we introduce a dessert? So these are madeleines,
Madeleines.
which are shell-shaped.
And sometimes our pieces are serendipitous. I looked at this beautiful avocet and thought it needed a panna cotta, not knowing that this avocet was also Italian, just like the dessert. So it worked out really well.
Again, a very classic Audubon piece, where instead of berries, they are sharing strawberry candies. This is probably Audubon's most iconic and popular piece to the general public, and it's become one of ours as well. People have bought it to send to friends and family down in Florida.
Mostly.
Yeah. This was an Valentine's themed piece. And again, the stories are realistic or they're very fantasy, and this is sort of this alien jello mold. So then we got to a point where it's like, okay, what else can we do? Let's go beyond Audubon. Let's make our own birds. Let's keep that going. This was a series we call Headbirds, kind of based on the auk, very symmetrical head-on. That last one was all digital. This combines Dora's amazingly realistic watercolor peanut butter cookie with a digital blue jay and a cup of latte.
Having to get the perfect bite on that cookie was such a chore.
And so bringing in the fruit again, like from her we shared some lemons earlier. Again, back and forth, sometimes digital, sometimes watercolor. It just all depended on the dessert and kind of how we wanted it to look. Napoleon. And then where else could we go?
Yeah. So in college, I was a communications major and I got to study film. And a lot of my art is inspired by films as well as, A Clockwork Orange. He was inspired by that film. So we have a few pieces that were inspired by older cult classics. Reefer Madness was a propaganda film that was designed to scare parents and their children from using marijuana. But it turned out to be an entertaining cult classic for those who use marijuana. So I asked Don, he had a buzzard that he made from this piece that went after Bugs Bunny. And I said, I need that buzzard for this piece, for this. And I had painted peeps from Easter for an Easter card. So I said, I want to use these peeps. I need that bird. And we're going to call it Peeper Madness. And this is what we got.
And I was still a little skeptical, but again, when we did it, it was magical. It's very spoofy. It's very much, a spoof on, I don't know why it's so blurry.
This one was fun.
I'm catching up. Apologize. It's a little blurry. I think I'm clicking too fast.
Yep.
So another horror cult classic. So what do you do with the blob? What do you do with the blob? What can a blob be? Well, it can be a flan. And we had fun with the words: caution, hot caramel, sticky sweet destruction. Nothing can stop it. It's got to go all the way. Another go ahead.
We also took on Hedwig and the Angry Inch. In this film, it featured gummy bears, which I was dying to paint. And I just needed Don to make me the most beautiful, flamboyant bird that he can think of. And we put in the gummy bears.
So A Bird of Paradise. I think this is based on one of the French, Martin? Yeah, I think so. And another amazing cult film from the 20s?
It was a silent film in 1927 by German director Fritz Lang. So I wanted a German dessert, and I chose a Linzer Torte, and I made it heart-shaped. So it was practicing my digital vector dessert. So made a really nice Linzer Torte, heart-shaped. And in the film, it is the working class versus the rich. And a line in the movie said, the mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart. So another serendipitous thing, it just happened to work with the Linzer Torte that was heart-shaped.
You want to do this?
I never saw this movie, but we were antique shopping and I saw this movie poster and was immediately inspired by it. And I said, we need to do a bird and dessert that has to do with this poster.
But also inspired by...
Yeah. I did see this movie, so I thought, let's combine them. Let's combine title, color, theme.
And I'm like, how do you do that? So there was a camp level to this film, definitely. And we brought that camp to the... so I don't know if you ever made this for your kids' birthday parties, but the dirt cake with the gummy worms.
So the cake is digital, but the worms are painted watercolor.
And those are Audubon's black vultures. And actually in that little glow is Millgrove, his homestead or his house. How could we not?
Yeah, I thought this might have been a little too on the nose, but it worked.
So how do you do an iconic poster like that?
A banana boat. Gonna need a bigger boat.
And a black swan.
And I love David Lynch. He was one of my favorite directors. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity to pay homage to him.
So there's actually a bird in the beginning of the movie sitting on this picket fence with the roses, and it's a robin. So that why not use that? We couldn't really make a ear dessert thing, but Dora found this.
There are elephant ears, but it doesn't translate well painted or digital. No one would know what it was. So I opted for a strawberry roulade. That was the most ear-like dessert I could think of because the character in the beginning of the movie found a random ear.
And then another David Lynch homage to Twin Peaks, which there's actually a line in the movie, the owls are not what they seem. So we made an owl not what it seemed. And they actually ate cherry pie a lot in the diner. So Dora chose cherry pie, but rather than have the bird just kind of attacking it or eating it, she made the wings into halves of pies. So we've also been inspired by other artists. I'm just going to kind of click through these quickly. Some of them are more obvious. Anyone? Warhol, Salvador Dali, huge influence. Surrealism, again, that fantasy world where these birds are kind of doing something that's maybe not so bird-like. Another Dali-inspired piece with rock candy. Another Dali piece with a gumball machine.
Gustav Klimt.
If you look at the
apple.
texture of the cross section of the pie, it was actually a graphic simplification of kind of Gustav Klimt. Monet, his haystacks now are cupcakes with flamingos. And then Hartford artist, the late Dow Lavoisier, made this, carved this, he called it a throne in Bushnell Park. And we were going to an event at Art Space, and we wanted to pay tribute to him. So we made his throne, and we the little Easter egg of the rubber ducky. He would always put rubber duckies in his pieces, and then Capital Ice Cream, which is a great ice cream shop in Hartford, created a flavor actually in honor of him called Dow's.
Tree.
Dora painted. Actually, we went down and they made you a cone, and Dora took a photo of it. And interesting, the day we went to look at the tree throne and take pictures of it, the only birds we saw were probably hawks, but some kind of raptor was just like circling over. So we felt that was a natural. And then to end it, we were lucky to do these commissioned pieces for Dean's Beans Coffee up in Massachusetts. And they are bird-friendly coffee, so they're promoting where they grow the coffee is not where they knock down all the trees. They leave everything for migratory and local birds. And then Dora actually researched some actual desserts from that area and then painted the coffee.
And the coffee. This is an affogato gelato with espresso being poured over it and a little biscotti.
With a quetzal.
With a quetzal. And watercolor cup of coffee with a macaron with this beautiful
Pygmy owl.
pygmy owl.
So that's us.
Thank you.
I'm back again, and my presentation is about Audubon's work. I think everybody have a piece of Audubon. How many people own a print or frame? You see, almost everyone. Have you all ever wondered What is it? Is it an original? Is it an etching? What is it? And most important, is it valuable? I think a lot of us ask that question. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about how I became involved in all this. I'm actually a bird watcher, as I said, but I'm actually a hotelier in Trinidad, catering towards the birding community. My mother is an artist, and I was lucky enough to inherit a few of her genes. So I'm also an illustrator. I paint birds in particular, plate drawings. I grew up in a household of very artistic people, and I have a great love for art and appreciation for art. So at a very young age, I started to collect art, and that's where we are today. I used Audubon's illustration, Birds of America, to improve my skills as an artist. I used it to learn about the techniques on how to illustrate birds and so forth, and that's how I got involved with it. And of course, when I had the opportunity to collect his work, I did. And I have to tell you, it was not easy navigating these works of art because, as I said, there are so many different editions, restrikes, reproductions out there. It's very, very hard to figure out what is what. So today I'm going to share my little knowledge I have about these pieces and to try to explain the various editions using 3 editions in particular. I'm going to use the Havel edition as an example, the October collection, and lastly, the Amsterdam collection. Okay, so can I take this out? Hello? Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to start over here. This is an actual plate from Birds of America, and it is a Havel, from the Havel edition. How we would tell that it's actually a Havel edition is these lines that run across there, which we call plate impressions. And it's actually an etching. So when they actually produced it, they made a plate, applied a lot of pressure on it, and it created an image, an outline image where, and then it was filled in by hand. It's all hand colored. So afterwards, you all could actually come and take a closer look at it. You would see no dots. It's actually solid color. So that indicates that it's a hand colored illustration. Okay. Also, if you were able to actually see the page open, all the pages actually have water stains or watermarks, and they run along the side here or the side there. And that would normally tell you the year the print was actually produced. They would have the year attached to it as well. Over on this side here, I spoke about etchings. So this is how an etching is produced. A copper plate is burnt. It's inked, it's wiped clean, and then using pressure, they would apply the paper onto the plate, and then an image is created. And how the image is created is that ink would go into the grooves of the burned plate, and then that's how the image is formed. So for instance, they would ink it, then they would put the paper on it, apply pressure, and then you get a positive here. And then by hand, they would actually coloring all the colors to bring it to life. And that's exactly what they did with this one here. Now, as we know, the Havel collection is a very limited collection, and it was a very expensive collection at for the time. It cost like almost £1,000 in those days to have access to this collection. So it was not available to everyone. Once the editions were completed, there was a big drive to make something more affordable, and we came up with the Octavia collection this year. And I just have 2 on display. And this is done slightly different. Rather than etchings, they're actually lithographs and stone lithographs. So how this process is done is actually they would use mediums that would repel and attract inks. And that's how they would create the negative. So instead of ink going into the crevices to create the image, it's ink actually on the surface where it's allowed to be absorbed versus where it's not allowed to be absorbed. And then again, they would apply pressure and the image is created, and then it's hand colored in. So all these are all hand colored images. And again, you could come and take a look at it after. Now, later on, much later on in the 1970s, they did an edition called the Amsterdam edition. And this is an example of the Amsterdam edition. You could actually see, again, the plate marks. And on the side here, you could see the notching where it was attached to the book. So this is a good indication that it's one of the original collections, you know, part of the original collection. But if you take a lens and you look into it, you would actually see it's a modern print. So they have several dots of color to make up the one color. Sorry, yeah. Yeah. And I spoke earlier about watermarks. All the Audubon prints have watermarks or water stains. And I'm going to show it to you now. Christina, let me see it, sorry. So if you put it behind here, you could see the markings. Could you all see that? It's written Amsterdam and the name of the paper manufacturer. Anybody knows why this is called Amsterdam edition? No? It was actually produced in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands to be exact, yeah. Yeah, that's why, yeah. So I just wanted to share these little techniques so when you all go home, you could take it out of the frame, look to see if you have any of these markings where it was attached to the book. And of course, you could look and see if there are water stains or water marks on it. And of course, you could take a loop and see if it's actually a real etching versus a modern lithograph, you know? So that's my contribution to the evening. And if you have any questions, I'll be around. But before I go, I want to share this piece with you here. It's my pride and joy. We all know Peterson Field Guides, yeah? We all grew up with it. That is one of my favorite artists that I had. And this is an original. This is the original plate for the swallows found in his book. So you all could take a look at it after. And you could still have all the markings on it when it went to production and so on. Yeah. So I wanted to share that with you all as well. So from Audubon being this here, we have all these versions of illustration, including what Don and Dora, I keep on forgetting, the explorer Dora. How could I forget? Yes, yes, yes. I apologize, yes. And we have all been impacted in one way or another by his work. And I just wanted to share that with you all tonight. So take a look at it. If you have any questions, I'm here. And before I close off, I just wanted to say, I have a long speech prepared here. Hold on a second. Closing remarks. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I would like to thank Christina and Eric for taking the time out of their very busy schedules, and these are two very busy people, to put this special event together for us tonight, sharing their knowledge and enthusiasm with the Watkinson and its collection. Thank you, Christina, for all the delicious bites and refreshments. You went beyond the call of duty, and I truly appreciate it. Chris, our new president, it has been a pleasure working with you. Thank you for carrying the torch that was lit by Annette, passed on to Al, and now you have brought it to the finish line. Thank you. Lastly, I would say, behind every great man, you would find a great woman. So, Chris, I think you have a great woman behind you. Allison? I would like to thank you personally for all the time and work you have put into this event to ensure it goes smoothly as it did. Our successful turnout is much credited to you with all the emails, updates, management of tickets, etc. Job well done, and I thank you. Our friends Don and Dora, the explorer. Thank you for sharing your beautiful works of art and the inspiration behind them with us. It was really fantastic. And by the way, Don and Dora has some of their works on sale tonight. So if anybody is interested in acquiring these fine pieces, this is your opportunity. They have it on, I believe, on the side here. Yeah. Okay. So before I go, that's not one. Yeah. So before I go, I would like to ask Chris to close off for us. Is that okay? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. And Chris, you will close off and ask if they have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? No, once again, thank you very much for everyone coming out. A lot of work went into this from Hartford Audubon's part, as well as from Trinity, Sir Gerard. Everyone really came together to make this a wonderful event. So thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see everybody out. I know it's getting a little bit late, but we're so happy to have you here. And we look forward to seeing you out in the woods, seeing you birding, seeing you in the library. And so thank you all for coming.